Welcome to Spirits and Cousins. I'm Tish, and Courtney's here with me. And last month, we were at Michigan Paracon and met someone we knew we had to have on the show. So today, we have the pleasure of sharing our interview with James Annitto, one of the premier demonologists, and he'll be sharing his stories, his views, and answering some really compelling questions. So let's jump right into our interview with James Annitto. Well, welcome to Spirits and Cousins. We are so excited to have someone very special with us today, James Annitto. He's on our show today, and James is many things. I will first get this out of the way. Yes, he is a demonologist. He's also a deacon, and formerly an ordained minister, a deliverance minister, a paranormal investigator, and researcher with PPRI out of New England and Canada. Don't forget, you can also find James on YouTube. Look him up. He's got a lot of YouTube videos, radio, podcast interviews, and a very exciting background. So thank you for joining us, James.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, and by the way, I loved your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile, your title is Demonologist Investigator.
Yeah, I actually haven't updated that in probably God knows who long. So I haven't used LinkedIn. I don't actually have social media at this time. I've actually deleted all my social media accounts. So that LinkedIn probably hasn't been updated in 9 years.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you this. There's not many people on LinkedIn with that title. I know because I searched. Since you are a student and a teacher of demonology, and with all the attention on everything seeming to be demonic, I'm hoping you can share with listeners how often you actually come across those true demonic entities. When we heard you speak at Michigan Paracon, it was very enlightening just to learn just what a small percentage of those investigations are really actually truly demonic. So I'm hoping we'll talk a little about that when you tell us a little bit about, your background, because I think everyone is fascinated by what experts in your field are really researching and what they're into. And you're especially well known. I mean, candidly, there's John Zaffis and there's you, who are very well known in this area. And I think Zaffis, he studied with Ed and Lorraine Warren. You were mentioning this earlier when we were talking. Because you're one of the ones that really stand out, this is why we're so excited to have you on. So I'm hoping that you can share with us everyone asks you this, but I think our listeners want to know too, your earliest experience. Is there anything that really sparked your interest in what you're studying and what you research now, not just paranormal, demonology, which came first? Tell us about how you got into this.
Definitely got to get a shout out to Ziggity. I love John, great friend of mine. Yes, he's an OG. Definitely have worked with him, spoke to him, and give a lot of props to that man for his knowledge. But yeah, no. So one of the most important things I try to tell people is that I never really got into this field because of a haunting. The occasional story you tend to hear from paranormal investigators is that when I was growing up, I felt like something was watching me, or we had activity in our house, or I was gallivanting through a cemetery and dabbling in things. And, we had these experiences. Nothing for me like that, actually. The domino effect that got me into the paranormal field was childhood trauma. And, throughout the years, I've been more comfortable to talk about it, to face the trauma and understand why I am in this predicament nowadays. And it's kind of eye-opening because I never woke up at 4, 5, 6, 7, especially when my brain was developing, until 25 years old, where I woke up and said, yeah, I want to be a demonologist today. It was more so like, actually, to be honest, it was actually a toss up between a police officer and a priest. And you'd be like, okay, well, the priest makes sense now, but the ideology of why I wanted to become a priest was more of a slap towards the face of a higher power, because I thought that if I could delve into the realms of theology, I could get a better idea of what God is or disprove God. Because growing up with this childhood trauma, I was left on the side of the street by my biological parents, or my biological dad. And I was then adopted into a Lutheran family. And, I still speak to them to this day, that my adopted family, but, it was a tough livelihood growing up, because, for one, my grandmother, which was my step grandmother, never had a child. And my grandfather, who was the father of my biological mother, of course, I had children, but it was dysfunctional in some form. So, that kind of continuity between both of them was chaotic at times. I love my mom, as I call her, who's my grandmother, but she comes from a different cloth. When she grew up, she was hit. She was enacted on a certain way than what children are raised nowadays. So this was things that I had to deal with. So coming into this household, we go to church every Sunday, of course, as a Lutheran. I'd have to go to Bible study as a kid. And, I'm hearing all these things from biblical scripture saying, oh, God is great. And I'm thinking in my head, even at such a young age, well, I'm in this predicament. If he was so good, then why the heck am I here? Why did my parents give me up? And these are sadistic things to think of at a young age, because like, I'm really, everything that's good, I'm really kind of stomping on because of what I had to deal with. So, the priest mentality came to the sense that I started to, as soon as I could really become literate and understand, reading and writing, I started picking up a lot of books based in mythology, theology, different religious belief systems, science. And I started developing into a love to biology, a love to science, where I started, quoting myself at a young age as a Darwinist, because I love evolutionary biology. And still Darwinism is, or neo-Darwinism as they call it nowadays, is still a leading theory in evolutionary biology, even though that is an internal debate that still goes on between biologists. But I latched onto that, and I really wanted to prove that macroevolution was quite a possibility to thwart the ideology of God. So, all the festers within myself, and then a lot of what my mom watched kind of imprinted on. She used to watch on Tell Williams all the time, and guess who was on there? Sylvia Brown, Tales of the Crypt, Encounters of the Fourth Kind, hell, reruns of Leonard Nimoy in Search of, Scariest Places on Earth, so on and so on, started to come out little by little, and it latched on. And I started to wonder, through all these conversations throughout humanity, there are conversations of the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians heavily believed in it. The Norse mythology heavily believed in it. The Greek mythology heavily believed in it. And a lot of Eastern cultures like Hinduism, which is the oldest modern day religion, truly believed in the afterlife. So it was like, okay, all these ghost shows are out, and it really kind of enamored me to kind of really start and then connect. If ghosts are real, could that really point towards the direction of God being real? And when I was 14 years old, Ghost Hunters came out, which is based out of Rhode Island. So it was an enigma in the sense that, it was like, oh, people actually do this, like legitimately outside of television. Like, even though they're on television, they are in Rhode Island, right down the street from where I lived growing up. So it was like an epiphany that, hell, maybe I should go out with a bunch of friends that really just want to be spooked out and see if that we could catch something. So we would go to a lot of legendary surroundings. New England is full of them, especially Rhode Island. We have the first vampire legend in the United States, Mercy Brown. We had a sane asylum. that, was shut down by the time I was 14 years old, and people used to break into, and go get spooked or go dabble into things. So, I started doing that, even though it wasn't in a negative sense. And even though I was stepping on private property, I wasn't vandalizing. It was more so of the search of these questions that had been presented to me through programs and even through my own internal thought of, do these exist? So 14 was the pinnacle. And that was really more of the cusp of near 15 years old. So I had dabbled as a hobby and into the aspect of ghost hunting until I was probably 18 years old, and then I joined the military. And then when I joined the military, I won't go too much on the tangent of my life and story, but when I went in the military, there was just an aha moment, a moment that I wouldn't necessarily have done, but I got baptized a little into my journey of basic training, which would be totally against my thought pattern at that time. But there was something that shot over me, like this electric feeling, this aha moment, and I raised my hand to get baptized. And then at that point, I started to become religious and started believing in God and started having a faith. And then when I got out of the military, like out of training, I then became a pastoral assistant at the local church, and then started dabbling back into the paranormal, where then I eventually founded my own team with Ghost Hunters of Supernatural Truth, with a member named Andre Courier, who is now deceased, unfortunately, died a couple of years ago, very young, unfortunately. But he was a member of a team called Rhode Island Paranormal Society, and they were on a prolific episode of The Haunted, which was on Animal Planet, which dealt with animals being affected. And their episode was called Demon Attack. And so after that episode, of course, the power of being on television got to all of their head, and that team split up. And, half their members joined with me and Andre. And we started then dabbling into residential locations because of their somewhat success, I guess, in helping the homeowner of that house with a man named Carl Johnson, who is a demonologist that appeared on Ghost Hunters. And actually, him and his brother were the first investigators of the Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island. So I had always ran into Keith at Walmart, because when I got in the military, I started working at Walmart. I was department manager of electronics because I have a tech background initially. Now it's far long past gone, even though I'm still a techie at heart. I always saw Keith in there, and he'd come to electronics looking at recorders and stuff like that. I had like this like fangirl moment where I saw Keith, and I said, "I know who you are." And he looked shocked for a second. He's like, "You do?" I was like, "Yeah, you're the demonologist on Ghost Hunters. I know all about you. I've read about the Warrens. I know your lineage." And he loved it because somebody was fangirling over him. So we became very close. But then Andre worked with Carl, and I was like, "Andre, could you do me a favor so I can fangirl over Keith's brother Carl? Can you give me Carl's information so I can reach out to Carl and then pick his brain about the topic of demonology and his background?" And so that's what happened. Through those many conversations, me and Carl became very well acquainted. My tech background, I build websites, I know equipment in and out. So he thought, okay, well, we need a tech manager. And I really was truly invested in doing that. He asked me to become his tech manager of his group at the time, Beyond the Veil Paranormal. And that was the tale that kind of wrote where I am now. I left Ghost, there was some bad blood for a long time, unfortunately, but that was the journey into demonology. And at that time, of course, I was a pastoral assistant at the Church of Christ, local to me. And then I basically then eventually became a minister and deliverance minister, being ordained through their denomination. But short story short, like I said, my story is much different than, I would say, 99% of people that get in this field. And I think it's something that's prepared me for the reasons I do what I do, because I was so agnostic or atheistic towards faith, and then now I am one of the most faithful people. And my love for God, the agape, true love of God, never wavers. But I also am very eclectic, so I'm not, in the sense, a Bible pusher. I let people believe in what they should believe in as long as it's for the good for humanity. But I think through that journey, it's prepared me for the moments that I have faced the past 14 years of being involved in demonology and 19 years of being in the paranormal.
Could you just share with us one of the things you shared at Michigan Paracon that I found so fascinating? You were talking about, everyone's got this obsession with demonology, and you were talking about what percent of the time, how often it actually is what's causing, whether you want to call it a possession or a haunting. You remember you were talking about this there? And I think that everyone thinks that whenever they encounter something that doesn't feel comfortable or feels evil, that it has to be demonic. And you were talking about this. Could you share the reality of how often you find a demonic infestation or possession?
Yeah, of course. The one thing I always note, this is my viewpoint, and this is how I analyze cases, and my perspective of it through how I've documented these cases and the context of these stories. Because, somebody that might have my title or might be just getting into demonology might get involved in a case and then analyze it differently and then jump to the conclusion that it's demonic through certain signs without trying to get through the nitty gritty of the cause and of effect, why the situation is happening. But realistically, I have probably gone close to 500 cases through understanding of case files in my file cabinet and things that I can kind of remember, which is kind of all blurred now, to be honest with you, because it's been so long. But I would say that if you had to give it a percentage, and I love statistics. I don't love getting to statistics, but I love that concept of it because it tells a whole picture that people can't deny. Is that I would say 1% of my cases have been demonic. So that means 5 cases. So quintessentially, it is very rare in the way I analyze it and what I've come across. Because you hit the nail on top of the head. There are people that deal with spirit activity or deal with other certain natural things where their mind automatically jumps to the conclusion that they're dealing with something spiritual, negative, or quintessentially because of Western culture, and most of us are Christians in this culture, that it is in fact demonic. But I try to lately give a psychology reference because of my psychology background. It's taught me a lot about how the mind is applicable to what we do in the paranormal field and how it can relate to why people jump to conclusions and are so subjective when they're dealing with things. But, it's just imagine a bush in front of you. And, this is where fight and flight comes into play. But the bush withers, like the bush moves, the brush moves. And you think, okay, well, then maybe there's an animal in it. Is that animal going to attack me? You either stand your ground and fight it, or you flee out of being scared. But in reality, there's probably that there's no animal in that bush, but it's actually just the wind that you cannot see, or the breeze, or the air, the oxygen that we cannot see with our eyes that's actually moving that brush. But we jump to the conclusion it's something bad because that's just humanity is. We love to jump to the negative before we jump to the positive things. And that is something that people do when it comes to hauntings. And this is applied to people that live in old houses that don't understand aspects of infiltration, creaky floors, the wrapping of wood. So you step on a panel of wood on your floor, 10 minutes later, it can make a sound, just not that minute. So, you have to approach these things in that kind of analytical thinking. But most people tend to jump to demonic. And that is the biggest hurdle when somebody already has in their mind that in their house there's a demon, because it's really hard to lead a horse to water and have the horse drink it. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink the water. So it's like they believe in something so much, it's really hard to reverse and have them go into a different pathway of not believing that it is demonic. And that's really the battles that I face a lot in my career of being a demonologist. So yeah, people should take that 1% to realize you might not be dealing with a demon. Observe it and to understand, okay, is it natural? And then if you check all those boxes off, then is it a lost loved one? Is it something that is residual to the house through emotions or through connectivity like an anchor? Or is it intelligent in the sense that it has response? So I never really try to tell people that they should talk to spirits in their own house, because you're opening a gateway, kind of opening that line of communication to something that's unknown. But there's things that you can observe to really to kind of observe if it's demonic or not.
I agree. It's so important to like debunk and check out what else could actually be going on. And what I find is that people are so fast to be scared of something instead of actually stopping themselves and thinking it through or trying to be realistic as to what might actually be going on. And it has amazed me when I explain that to people. It's like, just because you're startled doesn't mean it's something bad. Their eyes open a little bit and are like, oh, wait, because they don't think of it.
People are scared of the unknown, and even though it might be a spirit communicating, like everybody that gets scratched always jumps to that's negative. But I always say, if you ever had a child and you're ignoring them, they're probably going to claw at you to get your attention. So in the form of communication, through the decibel range of our hearing, we cannot hear a spirit communicate unless we're clairaudient. We're not going to be able to hear their voice. If we're not a medium where we channel something, or we're clairvoyant where we can see something, they're going to attempt to do certain things to reach and attempt to communicate to you. And sometimes we might take that negatively, because guess what? The unknown scares us. But, when these things happen, that's what people unfortunately do. They jump to the worst case scenario, because that's the easiest thing for humans to conceive, that, oh God, this is negative. It's here to harm my family. But, I have a prolific case that I always talk about where the guy called us in, calling it demonic, but eventually through enough data collecting and through using the Hans Holzer methods of using mediums that did not know the scenario, eventually found out it was the grandmother that once lived there and died in there, and he was provocating the grandmother. So she started retaliating like a grandma would do. If I called my grandma Bitch, my grandma would slap the living crap out of me. I don't even care how old she is. She'd get the boom down and shove it up my what. And, so that retaliation was in that format, because he was speaking ill towards something he did not know what he was speaking to, even though through conclusion, it most likely it was his grandmother.
Yep. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because, you hear about people's experiences, and the thing that is apparent to me when I listen to stories and watch some of these shows and I listen to other podcasts is that because a spirit is mean or angry does not make it demonic either. Some energies and spirits, if they were angry in life, who knows? They're probably angry in death as well. But anytime that anyone encounters anything that's anything other than smelling like flowers, they assume it's demonic.
Yeah, and they, and the person could have died maliciously through murder or through unknown circumstances, and they're confused, and sometimes confusion turns into anger because that's just how humans react to certain things when they're confused. Sometimes it's not love and peaceful. So if you died maliciously, or if where people tend to investigate where places of sadness occurred, like insane asylums, hospitals, prisons, those people weren't probably happy being there or happy for the situation that occurred to them. So sometimes that emotion they give off can also come off in some retrospect negative, even though they aren't. They're just a lost soul that's confused, and they do not know how to reciprocate positively towards that person that's maybe asking either demeaning questions and sometimes where I feel like it, and I like to call it, instead of investigation, a lot of people do interrogations.
Yeah, provoking them.
Or provoking them, but like interrogations, asking the most mundane questions instead of trying to be neutral and peaceful to them, so there's, and sometimes what I do with EVP sessions, I try to make them a part of the conversation. I say, oh, this is a beautiful home. What do you think? I try to make it appealing to them to actually want to react in a positive manner instead of saying, what is your name? When did you die? When did you live? It's like I'm sitting, like they want to sit in front of a detective and get interrogated. That I think that sometimes that they react negatively towards that as well, because I wouldn't like that if somebody was questioning me.
Not at all. So, what has been your most intense investigation?
Oof. That's a good one. Outside the demonic realm, I would say that one of the more insane investigations at Old South Pittsburgh Hospital in Tennessee, in Chattanooga. And why I would say that was crazy is just because of the certain people of experience that were there, the certain things that through collectivity that people actually witnessed with their eyes. And once again, I don't claim to have any clear abilities. I'm not psychic medium. Maybe I'm extra large, whatever, on my shirt size. But at the same time, we witness these things with our actual physical eye instead of like a mind's eye. And it was pretty prolific in the sense that, instead of seeing a dark shadow figure, we saw a shadow figure that was emanated by white light. I seen scratches appear on somebody's neck out of thin air when they didn't do this like most people do, unfortunately. But it actually walking behind them, we started seeing the scratches appear. So that was probably one of the most intense investigations because there were just so many different things happening. And then Old South Pittsburgh Hospital, once again, place of sadness. People died there horribly, malpractices, so on and so on. So a lot of that emotion there is still stagnant and still tends to affect people and then emulate in a way that can affect the people there. So I would say that was one of my intense investigations, but there's a place nearby me that always seems to give the golden goose, and that's the USS Salem. And always go there. It's not intense in the baddest way, but there is always something that occurs on the USS Salem, which is its largest heavy cruiser, or what was the largest heavy cruiser in the U.S. Navy, which was actually bigger than most battleships. But every time I go on that ship, audible phenomena happens. Last time I was on there, we heard a girl screaming. And mind you, this is not like close enough where you could hear people scream. Knocks, responses to cat balls. And, I have a love-hate relationship with cat balls, but when you see a cat ball roll off the bed and all that stuff, there's intensity to that because these are actual phenomena that are happening with our eyes viewing this stuff. It's not something we recorded on video, watch it and something happened, or record it audibly through audio EVPs. These are things that are actually happening real time and absolutely countless people. But yeah, so some of those are my most intense investigations. Now, all my demonic cases have been beyond the word intense, very, I like to call them really like a drama in a sense, because you're dealing with people's livelihood, people's emotions. There are usually psychological issues at play, even though there is the demonic there. So there's so many moving parts in those cases. So those are, far more than intense. Those are something that I never looked forward to, and thankfully it's been quite a few years since I dealt with one. But yeah, no, I wake up every day hoping that I don't come across one.
It's my understanding that folks that might be challenged mentally or be suffering from an illness or have some sort of weakness, is it true that whether it's conscious or not, they become more open for inviting that sort of energy inside of them and to them?
Well, there's not enough applicable research to actually say that like empirically, but it's hard to say anything is empiric to the paranormal field. It's a pseudoscience anyway, and it's all theoretical. But I would say that people that do have mental health issues or maybe are on the spectrum of autism might have easier route to the spiritual realm. Like with autistic people, people with the autism spectrum, they process things a hell of a lot differently than an average person does that doesn't have autism. And they are most of them are highly intelligent people. They probably have something in the wiring of their brain where it allows them to have that acute knowledge to the spiritual realm. Like with us, and there's a lot of study with the pineal gland, what people call the third eye for a very long time, especially Hinduism. And we always in science thought the pineal gland was a dead gland, but we actually realized it actually spurts out an electric signal like an antenna, and it actually also releases melatonin, which what melatonin does. It helps you go to sleep or makes you be able to rest, be more comfortable and relaxed. And so I think when our brain develops, I think that there is an ability where if you continue believing or you have a clear ability, I think everybody has some sort of sensitivity when they grow up. We always say the sixth sense, but in reality, I think there's 9 senses that actually is fundamentally in science now. But if you really fundamentalize as the sixth sense, I think everybody has that. But there's a point in time in our life where it shuts off for some people, and then ghosts just become this kind of myth and folklore and the subjective story that we hear. But then there are people that continue having this ability, the sense that doesn't shut off. Maybe how their synapses is fired off or how their brain develops. Who the hell knows? And they are still able throughout their adulthood and throughout their times of life, able to see spirits, hear spirit, however they are able to interact with spirit. So maybe when people with the autism spectrum, maybe there's something that happens with the brain development where it keeps them active to seeing things more than an average person that tends to develop away from the idea of seeing and hearing and being connected to the spirit realm. And then people with mental health, there are things firing off incorrectly. There's chemical reactions in their brain, so maybe they become more susceptible to these forces. I tend to see that the demonic tend to go more towards, and I don't say this in the sense of like somebody that has kind of any applicable form of autism, but somebody that's more feeble-minded and more gullible and maybe have addictive personality, which is a mental disorder. So I think those people get targeted more because, especially in the demonic, they do try to engage with the weakest link because they're more willing to invite through what they are dealing with through their mental health. But that is not always the case because sometimes there have been cases that not I have observed, but through literature, like Padre Pio, who had true love of God, he was affected by the demonic, and the demonic would always try to wither him away from his faith, but he would never kind of fall down that pathway. He always kept God in his heart. So there are people that are really engaged and strong in faith and in themselves, right, and they have that self-confidence and self-respect where they still can be targeting because sometimes it's a challenge for those kind of entities. If they can engage and thwart somebody with the strongest of faith, that means the dominion of God is weaker towards humanity. Because to me, I would want to target the strongest enemy, then go after the weakest. In reality, like if you're in a fight, are you going to go after the little guy or are you going to go after the big guy first? I'm going to go after the big guy and then take out the little guy. So it's just like, but that doesn't always
right
relate to the actual case. Tends to be the weakest person.
It's like somebody like Father Amorth, who was, look at what he's well known, probably the most well-known exorcist within the Catholic Church. And you wonder how many times during his lifetime and his career did he get challenged, because he did many, many cases that took weeks. Some of them took weeks to clear out. I don't know if you have any thoughts on someone like him. Is that what you're talking about when you were saying that the demonic will try to challenge and go after the strongest sometimes, especially someone within the faith?
Well, yeah, you can even say the case that I've come across. One of the cases that I was brought on, they had a team that had no clue who I was. And on EVP, they got James Annitto, clear as day, and they researched my name and found out what I did and who I was.
Yeah.
So, I think what we call it being marked. I think when you start challenging and standing firm against the devil and against his legion, if you look at it that way, then yeah, I definitely think that there is that challenge. And, I have faced it. I haven't come across many cases where they knew my name. That was the only situation. But I think that's a part of what I do. It's like Sun Tzu, the art of war, know your enemy. So Gabriel North, Father Gabriel North is, I want to say, a hero of mine, because I have really no heroes beside, Jesus Christ. But, I don't really icon people that I know, like in my life, like people do with celebs and stuff like that. But I have a tremendous amount of respect for Father Gabriel North, because he was noted to have done over 100,000 exorcisms. And then there was a recent movie that just came out on him called The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe. And I love Russell Crowe. Gladiator is one of my favorite movies of all time. So, The Pope's Exorcist was actually, surprisingly, I thought it was going to be an awful movie, because there's a lot of bad exorcism movies. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible. But it was actually fantastic. And it shows the stoic nature of how Father Gabriel North was, because that's really how he was. He was so ingrained in his faith. The one thing that I would say about him is that he was not eclectic at all. If you did not believe in God and believe Jesus Christ and the catechisms of the Catholic Church, you were most likely going to hell. And I don't necessarily 100% agree with that at all. And but he was so strong on his faith, and he was the chief exorcist for the Vatican, and that is a powerful role when your only person you really answer to is the Pope. So I have tremendous respect. I actually tell people that want to start to dabble into demonology, in the sense the academic, not applied demonology, where you apply the academia and then start viewing it in towards people's houses. I actually tell them to go read An Exorcist Tells a Story by Father Gabriel North. It's one of my favorite books. If you are if you're closed-minded to a certain thing, it's going to throw you off, because it is very Catholic based. If you're a Wicca, if you're a witch, if you're any of other paganistic roots or Islamic roots, or outside of most Judeo-Christian belief systems, you're going to hate the book, because it really just kind of sort poops on you. But it really has a lot of great feedback and what he's experienced, how you can tell, how you can applicably handle it as the individual is being affected by it. But yeah, Father Gabriel North is a legend, and I wish I would have been able to meet him in his life, but he's been deceased for the past few years now, quite a few years now. But yeah, Father Gabriel North. The other person that I really look up to in the sense of like Father Gabriel North is he's one of the leading exorcists now in the Catholic Church, would be Father Chad Ripperger. He is also a PhD in psychology too, something that Father Gabriel wasn't. So he applies both forms of the science and theology to dealing with people, which is, to me, is fantastic.
So it's interesting to me too that you bring up autism, because I actually work with people with autism on a daily basis. And I have frequently wondered if a piece of what's going on is because they're so sensitive and have what's called sensory issues, but what I call having sensitive sensory system.
Yep.
Do you think that is part of why people with autism might have potentially more abilities or can see more or are wired differently?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I don't want to jump too much into it because I'm not a behavioral specialist. I think like yourself, I believe that's your background, right? You're a behavioral analyst. But I think that has something to do with it in a sense. If you look at behavioral psychology, right? Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud were heavily into actually paranormal connections to life. Carl Jung, the shadow self and all that stuff, which is utilized by a lot of people in the occult, actually. I think that, there could be an enigma where people with sensory issues definitely maybe have more of a perception to the spiritual realm. I don't have autism. I'm a see to believe it kind of person. And if I could experience it, that's why, even though I do believe mediums and these people that have abilities exist, I really test these people before I utilize them. So
as you could.
Yeah, I'm not autistic. If I was autistic, I would tell you, but I actually do know somebody that, her name is Kayla Cromer. She's an actress in Hollywood. And she actually has autism, and she says she sees spirits, and she does believe it's because of her being within the spectrum. So, people that have autism that are, functional in the sense of in society, that they have claimed this. So I have to give it credence, because if they're saying it, why is it for me to say, no, you're not dealing with it? So, I don't have autism. I can't say personally that that is what's apparent, but like I said, there needs to be more scientific data where we take people with autism that's willing to go to a haunted location and see what they feel compared to people that are of an average person that doesn't that are within the spectrum and that are mediums, and see what they see and kind of collect that data and see if they're kind of hitting the nail on the head. Maybe that's a study somebody can do, and it doesn't seem unethical as long as people are willing. So, but there needs to be more applied data for their investigation.
Can I ask one more question on that? Not about autism, but James, I have to ask you. I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about how certain people are more sensitive than others, possibly.
Yep.
I think a question that I always wonder about is, why are children more sensitive to spirits and energies? Am I wrong, or have you seen this as well? I mean, it's kind of been something that was called out, and I heard it several times at Michigan Paracon when we were there, that for some reason children are more maybe open and can see or hear spirits and whatever. Yeah.
Well, that goes back to brain development. Their brain's not fully developed. The pineal gland's not fully developed. So I think the pineal gland, which is the third eye, has some sort of lock and trigger to it. Like it works or it doesn't, in the sense of seeing the spiritual realm. With neuroscience becoming more of a acquainted field in science and developing every day, I think we'll come more to learn about how our brain development and our brain usage actually comprehends that. Because neurotheology is actually a thing that is real. It's a very interesting field that mixes neuroscience and theology together. But I think it has a lot to do with brain development, and plus children in the adolescent stage are much more gullible as well. So they're a lot more allowed more to be attuned to the situation than an adult that might be able to turn their shoulder and not kind of communicate or continue that conversation or acknowledge something that's going on while a child is, because they're so innocent in the sense that they can attract more. I think they also give off a certain vibration to where spirits might be attracted to them. So I think there's a lot of fundamental things you can look at, but I think brain development is key when it comes to children. Plus, on top of it, most cases the poltergeist activity, which is the aspect of thought form, even though called a noisy ghost, it's a form of thought form where most like adolescent female, through of course her early womanhood, tends to have a psychic tantrum and then create this artificial intelligence known as a poltergeist. So that tends to happen more with children too, and boys as well. So I think that has a lot to do with why children experience it more. The gullibility, the brain development at an early age. The sensory is developing at that early stage too. So there's a lot of pieces to that, why I think children tend to fundamentally see the spiritual realm more than maybe adults do.
Very well explained. Courtney, you were going to say?
Yeah, well, I think for me, what I've noticed is that children are so much more open-minded. And as we get older, we become more and more closed-minded because of our own experiences or the things that people have taught us that we just immediately believe in instead of questioning. So I think children are so open-minded because they don't have those learned experiences and maybe even trauma yet.
True. And, I always jump to it like children believe in the tooth fairy. They believe in Santa Claus. They're open to these ideas like you stated. So I think that just allows them to be more open to the ability for them to experience things. So there's just so many things that have been talked about, but once again, there needs to be more data in a lab-based study that proves this. But it's hypothetical, but it's it has been acknowledged and talked about for many, 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 many years. So to me, it's pretty accurate that children tend to experience more things. But even in demonic cases, children tend to be the first ones to experience the situation, because once again, this thing is, demonic doesn't come off burly and stoic and strong and negative. It actually comes off loving and embracing, and inviting. And that's what's the deception factor, a masquerade to it. So, it tends to go towards the person that's going to be more inviting at first too. Then once that invitation is there, then that explosion happens, and then everybody's dealing with it, and then it starts to target the weakest person.
I noticed on your website that one of the services you offer is negative haunting counseling. And I have to say, I found that I was very interested in asking you about this, because I think it's just something that rarely does anyone talk about. So I would love for you to kind of tell us more about that and your work that you're doing there.
Yeah. So one thing I tend to believe with people that deal with hauntings is people that deal with hauntings for a long time. And, clinically, I cannot say I am not a master's degree or have any certifications to clinically diagnose somebody, nor a doctor. But, what I have seen through the DSM and through my understanding of disorders is that people that deal with negative hauntings or demonic hauntings, or even haunting in general, that become stressed from it, do develop post-traumatic stress disorder once the situation is over with, or develop disorders while dealing with it as well. So negative haunting counseling is in the form that if you're dealing with a negative haunting, there are ways to take your life back. There are ways to approach how you restructure your life from dealing with the negative haunting. I always advise people to go see a therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist to kind of relieve that stress, kind of there are a lot more holistic people involved in psychology nowadays too, especially humanistic psychology, where they will be more receptive to what people deal with in that supernatural realm of things. So I always advise people to either go to people that I know that can effectively deal with them in their state, or do online sessions with them, or go to psychology.org, which you can actually look up holistic psychologists and stuff like that, and say you really should speak to somebody beyond me as well, because I will talk to you about how you can restructure your faith, how you can restructure yourself. But I am not a clinician and say that maybe you should go to CBD, this kind of therapy, or do some sort of epigenetics therapy. I don't have that ability to do so. So I always tell people to go see a therapist, and then they can still talk to me. And then most times, as long as the therapist is cool with it, and the HIPAA protocol is not broken, and they give permission, I speak to the therapist as well and say, this is the things they're struggling on. This is maybe the things that they still believe that's going on, but I don't believe it, in the sense that I think they're just having this reoccurring nightmare of what they've lived with. So when I do negative haunting counseling, it's really trying to rebuild that person's life, or help them regain their life during the process as well. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, when they're dealing with this, and people hate me for this sometimes, but they become into the victim role, and they start blaming God, they start blaming other people. Sometimes they don't blame themselves when they really need to blame themselves. So I really try to also help them find the area where they can get through this with faith and strength, self-confidence, building that good ego of how, this is my house, this is not your house. So there's a lot that goes into that form of counseling. It's really a roller coaster ride, and unfortunately, what I've come to see, a lot of people don't want to listen. It's like they feel like that there's like some magic pill or spirit fingers that will conclude the situation. But a lot of people don't realize that a good analogy I say is that I'm a crutch. If you break your leg, I'm a crutch. You use it till your leg heals, and then you start walking by yourself again. I'm that crutch. You're going to have to learn eventually how to walk on yourself, because you're going to have to regain the confidence and your strength and your faith to overcome this situation. Yes, I can add booster shots. I can add pills to this, but in a sense, you still have to, like, let's say you have a heart condition. Yeah, you can take your medicine, but most doctors will tell you to live a healthy lifestyle, healthy diet, drink water, exercise. Crap. You got to do that stuff. If I tell you advice, follow the advice, and take back your life.
And that's why you're studying what you're studying, to help.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I've always been interested in psychology. It has a lot more to do with paranormal than the not paranormal side of it, but because of the childhood trauma that I dealt with, I've always wanted to get a better idea of why people do the things they do, and how our understanding of psychology has developed since people like Hippocrates in Greek times, that related that there is more of a psychological element than the supernatural. So, I've always been fascinated in some form of fashion, but getting that psychology degree gives me more of an emphasis to kind of say, hey, I'm in your house. I have these credentials. I was ordained in 2 different denominations. I have associates in theology. I have a psychology degree. These are my credentials. I'm not just some normal Joe Schmo that calls himself a demonologist and is going to make your situation worse. Here's my credentials. Here's my experience to back it up, and I can do my best to help you.
What I found is that, and it's very similar to you, what I found is that people who tend to have lower self-esteem or question their decisions, who might make a decision and then backtrack on, oh, wait, no, my gut says this, and go back and forth. And the people who go towards fear very quickly are the ones who tend to get overtaken more easily. Is that what? your experience? Because it sounds like the negative counseling that you do helps to bolster their confidence and give them that strength to be able to not only survive, but start to thrive even more.
Yeah, definitely. You know, my way is far-fetched compared to everybody else because like, you know, you watch the television shows, you know, I always joke that I have an Impala, I have a shotgun full of rock salt, and I kick down doors fighting demons. But I am a serious person, but I am also mainly a jokester. And I love to joke. I love to make people laugh. So when I come involved in people's houses, it's not always so to the point serious. I'm a very blunt person, and I will tell you kind of how it is. But I'm not there to make their life about the paranormal. I'm not there to continue to ask. Like, yeah, I have my questionnaire and my interview stages that talks about what they believe they're dealing with, when it's occurred, a lot of neutral questions, what medicines they're taking. But you know, when I go there, when it's time to actually be physically there, I'm not there to make it about the paranormal, so to say. I make them laugh. I say stupid things in the sense that is PG or G rated, you know, because I think laughing is the best medicine. So I want to distract them from their however many days or months or years or weeks they've been dealing with this. And when I'm there to relieve their mind, be that beacon of life for them. And I definitely have a far-fetched approach than most people, but yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. That's basically, you know, fear. It's like the new thought belief of laws of attraction. You attract what you are. So if you're negative, you're going to attract negative. So if you have that fearful mindset, you know, fear is not a positive emotion. It's very negative. So you're going to attract the negative things. They're going to smell that out. They're going to come towards you. They're going to gravitate towards you because they know that they can affect you. Then if somebody that has a positive stoic attitude, they're going to be like, oh, do I mess with that person? Like back to what I was saying earlier, you know, do I mess with that person? Do I mess with this person? What's going to create the better success for me to be detrimental to this family or to this person?
That's what I found. I tend to be more chill with spirits. I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens. And I'm not afraid to stand up if I need to. But I have really noticed those people who have just these weak spots. Those are the ones that they just go for.
Yeah. It's people that have trauma too, that usually tend to get anxiety disorders, depression, so on and so on, unless you make that trauma at such an early stage where you don't let it consume your life. So it's kind of the same thing with that. You know, you're the weakest link and you're in a negative situation or a haunting, you know, if you don't strengthen your self-confidence or your self-esteem, you will be the one that's probably apparently more targeted.
I've also found that the people who don't have a sense of community and really long for it, but maybe don't know how to find it, those are also the targets. Because again, those weak spots.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, even though I'm not a Bible pusher in a sense, you know, if people say that they're Christian, like I'm, you know, even though I've been ordained, I don't regularly go to church every weekend. I'm not one of those people that go to church every weekend. You know, I pray in my house to God. You know, I have if need be, if I really want the Eucharist, you know, I have blessed host right here. Nice. So, you know,
you just dip some of those in hummus, right?
What was it called? But no, that's why I tell people too, if you're of the faithful, you don't have to go all the time, but go to church, go to temple, go to whatever faith structure or a brick and mortar location that you can, because I find when I do go to church, which is once in a blue moon, you know, I do find it peaceful when I really can't overcome something in life because, you know, I make mistakes and I have situations that are hurdles in my life too. I will go to church, I will sit there in the pews and I will just think, and I will let the comforts of that that church, and my thoughts collect. So I tell people to go to church when they're dealing with these situations or whatever they believe in, because build that community. There are other people there that you can talk to about your struggles in faith, because a lot of people that deal with the negative or the demonic, especially it's more specifically demonic, even though they might say they have faith, it is actually a struggling faith. They actually either blame God or blame themselves in the sense that their faith is not good enough. So to empower that is to be surrounded by a religious community, which is sometimes very heavily important in someone's life.
I go to the Redwoods.
Okay. See? I would love to go to the Redwoods. I've always wanted to go there. Like, my destination in California is San Diego. I was just there this past July. I love San Diego. But I want to make my way up north to see the Redwoods one day.
Come visit us.
That was part 1 of our interview with James Annitto. Join us for part 2, where we'll hear more about his journey to the paranormal, how often he encounters demonic entities, and a fun word association game at the end. If you want to share your paranormal story with us, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at spiritsandcousins@gmail.com or find us on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok with the username Spirits and Cousins. Thanks for joining us.